The first mistake. An arrogant governor. The human skinned Governor Drac alive, and the Gorn will never forget his agonized screams. Speaker slouched in a chair inside his dwelling on the Gorn homeworld of Gorks, his reptilian head cradled in clawed hands. His scales were matted with sweat, dark bags hung under his eyes. He looked traumatized, utterly exhausted. The door swung open, and Nexer strolled in, pausing at the sight of his longtime friend looking so haggard. A grave crisis. By the egg, Speaker, you look like death warmed over. What happened? Nexer asked. I just returned from an emergency session of the Galactic Council. A grave crisis has erupted between the hegemony and the humans, and it's all that idiot Drac's fault. Governor Drac, what did he do? Speaker took a shuddering breath. A human trade delegation arrived at his colony for scheduled negotiations, but that arrogant fool took offense at having to deal with them. He seized their ships, imprisoned their crews. Oh, it gets worse. When the humans protested, Drac had their ambassador dragged before him in chains, a human named Harry Hill. Drac leaned forward, slapped him, and said, "The Gorn answer to no one, and the humans need to learn their place." Nexer's scales paled. That utter fool. Doesn't he realize what he's done? How the humans will react? Retaliation. He does now, Speaker whispered, a haunted look in his eyes. What the humans did in retaliation is seared into my mind. It was like nothing I could have imagined. If we cannot make this right, I fear it will mean the end of the hegemony itself. Ambassador Hill slowly raised his head, murder in his eyes. Speaker said, his voice trembling. He spoke in a tone that dripped with barely restrained fury. Governor Drac, I respectfully request that you release me and my people immediately. We came here in good faith to engage in peaceful negotiations for the betterment of both our peoples. Assaulting a diplomatic envoy is an act of war. An ultimatum. Speaker took a shaky breath before continuing. Drac scoffed dismissively, saying that the humans should be grateful the Gorn deigned to allow them to grovel at their feet. At this, Ambassador Hill coldly replied, I will give you one final opportunity to release us and issue a formal apology for this egregious breach of protocol. I strongly suggest you take it. And Drac's response? Nexer asked, leaning forward. The fool just laughed, Speaker exclaimed. He leaned back in his chair, flicking his hand contemptuously, as if to shoo away an annoying insect. Ambassador Hill nodded slowly, then calmly reached up and removed a small device from his shirt collar. He spoke a single word into it, Carthage. The human response. The human worshipped. Speaker paused, a haunted look in his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Drac even made a snide comment about the famed human commander calling for his mommy. But then a low rumble built, and the ground began to shake. Drac's eyes widened as he leaped up from his chair in alarm. By the egg, what happened next? Nexar whispered. A thunderous boom split the air as a gargantuan human warship, easily 10 times the size of the largest Gorn dreadnought, materialized directly above the governor's palace, emerging from some kind of cloaking field. As the palace guard stood frozen in terror, dozens of hulking, combat-armored human marines beamed into the throne room in flashes of light, instantly cutting down the guards with ruthless efficiency. Annihilation from above. Speaker shuddered, his claws digging into the armrests of his chair. The human ship began systematically annihilating every Gorn military vessel and installation from orbit with casual ease, its impossibly powerful weaponry ripping through even the strongest shields like tissue paper. It was a display of overwhelming technological superiority, the likes of which I have never seen. As Speaker recounted the stunning events in Drac's throne room, Nexer could only listen in rapt disbelief. Drac, the arrogant fool, had been reduced to a sniveling wreck, throwing himself to the floor and groveling pathetically as the human marines seized him. Hill just calmly brushed off his jacket, cool as ice, and strolled over to where Drac was pleading for mercy. Speaker said. He reached down, grabbed a fistful of Drac's robe, and yanked him right up to eye level. A cold message. Nexer's eyes widened. What did he say? In this deceptively mild tone, while he was discussing the weather, Hill informed Drac that he was under arrest for assaulting a Federation diplomat, and that the Gorn colony was now under direct human control. Hill tapped his collar communicator and requested a direct line to Orcs. Moments later, the Emperor himself appeared on the throne room's main screen. Nexer's jaw dropped. The Emperor? What did Hill say to him? Speaker leaned forward. He bowed, all polite-like, and calmly stated that while he regretted the circumstances, humanity was taking control of the colony. Said that if any Gorn forces tried to stop them, they'd be destroyed. Diplomatic maneuvers. A stern warning. He threatened the Emperor? Nexer asked, his voice trembling. As the Emperor sputtered, unable to even form a coherent sentence, Hill held up a hand and said, Your Majesty, please don't be alarmed. We only want to preserve galactic peace. I give you my word. If the hegemony doesn't take aggressive action, no further harm will come to the Gorn. We wish to be friends. Then he smiled, all disarming-like, and inclined his head as the Emperor sat there in shocked silence. Nexer shook his head slowly. I can't believe it. And the Emperor, he just accepted this. That was 3 days ago, Speaker said. Since then, the Emperor ordered all our ships to stay well away from the colony. The human power. Nexer looked at his friend in amazement. Speaker, do the humans really have that much military power? Taking an entire planet was that easy for them? Speaker met Nexer's gaze, his eyes haunted. He nodded slowly. Nexer sat back in his chair, the scales on his head furrowing as he tried to process the enormity of what Speaker had just told him. He looked at his friend, confusion and wonder warring in his eyes. Speaker, if the humans truly possessed the capability to conquer the Gorn so effortlessly, why did they refrain from doing so? Why allow the hegemony to save face after such a blatant provocation? Speaker leaned forward, steepling his clawed fingers, a pensive expression on his reptilian face. In the aftermath of the takeover, I spoke at length with Ambassador Hill, seeking to understand the human perspective on these events. The human philosophy. Nexer cocked his head. And what did you learn? Hill revealed that humans place immense value on diplomacy. They always seek to resolve conflicts with the minimum force required. This philosophy, he told me, was born from the hard lessons of their past. Oh, Nexer asked, intrigued. Speaker nodded. The ambassador confided that long ago, before they took to the stars, the human homeworld was racked by terrible wars. Nation fought nation, leading to unimaginable destruction and loss of life. Entire cities were obliterated, millions perished. Nexer's eyes widened. By the egg, a new path. Determined to break this cycle of violence as they ventured into space, humans vowed to always prioritize peace, even as they developed the military strength to defend themselves and their allies. Speaker paused, remembering. Hill looked me in the eye and said, We humans desire friendship and cooperation with all races, but there is a saying on our world, speak softly and carry a big stick. Nexer tilted his head. Carry a big stick. What does that mean? He explained that by possessing overwhelming strength, yet using it sparingly and proportionally, only when absolutely necessary, humans believe they can more effectively preserve peace than through force alone. Speaker tapped a claw on the arm of his chair. The more I reflect on it, the more wisdom I see in the human approach. The new order. Galactic implications. Speaker's gaze turned distant. In my duties as an envoy for the Galactic Council, I've studied the histories of countless civilizations, and there's a clear pattern. When stronger nations throw their military weight around unchecked, it breeds deep resentment among the weaker races. Even if peace is achieved in the short term, the seeds of future conflict are sown. Nexer nodded slowly. I see your point. Resentment festers. Old wounds don't heal. Precisely, Speaker said. But the humans, by defeating the Gorn so utterly yet choosing not to conquer, They sent a clear message. They demonstrated their values, their strength, but also their restraint. They've opened the door to a new relationship between our peoples. A new era. Nexer stroked his scared chin thoughtfully. The Gorn certainly grasped now that the humans are not to be provoked. Indeed, Speaker replied. But more than that, I believe there's a growing realization that humanity, for all its might, is fundamentally a positive, stabilizing force in the galaxy, not a destructive, conquering one. Nexer shook his head in amazement. It's almost hard to fathom. To have that level of power, yet the wisdom and restraint to wield it so judiciously. The humans are something special, my friend. Speaker said quietly. I don't think they're like any other species we've encountered. There's a nobility to them, a greatness of spirit, even as they possess the military force to impose their will without challenge. Nexer sat back, his eyes distant as he absorbed Speaker's words. You've given me much to ponder, Speaker. The implications of humanity's role on the galactic stage, it's staggering. Reflections on power. Speaker nodded. The galaxy is shifting, Nexer. I believe we're on the cusp of a new era, and I have a feeling humanity will be at the center of it all. Nexer shook his head slowly. To have seen what you did, Speaker, the casual power the humans wielded, I can only imagine how it must have felt to stand in the presence of beings who could extinguish our civilization with a snap of their fingers, yet stayed their hand. Speaker's eyes took on a faraway look. It was humbling, Nexer, profoundly so, to glimpse the true extent of their capabilities, to understand viscerally how outmatched we would be in a conflict. Personal impressions. He shuddered. How did Hill strike you personally? You spoke to him at length, got a sense of the man. What was your impression? Speaker considered this. Focused, formidable, but not cruel or vindictive. There was a calm assuredness about him. He carried himself with the air of someone who knows he has the upper hand, but takes no pleasure in wielding it. The strategic game. Strategic mastery. Indeed, Speaker said. I left my conversations with the ambassador with a profound sense that as long as humanity walks the path of the peacemaker, the galaxy will be a safer, more stable place. But by the egg, Nexer, I pray we never give them cause to be our enemy. I fear no force in the universe could stand against them if their hand was forced. Nexer shuddered at the thought, the scales on his neck prickling. He opened his mouth to reply, to seek more insight into the enigma that was humanity, but the words died on his lips. Instead, he rubbed his scaled chin thoughtfully, his brow furrowed. He leaned forward, fixing Speaker with an intense gaze. Do you really think the Gorn will change their ways after this incident? That they'll abandon their aggressive expansionist tendencies just like that? A sobering revelation. Speaker clasped his hands together, his claws clicking softly. After the initial shock of the human intervention wore off, the Emperor convened an emergency meeting of the hegemony's top military and intelligence officials. They needed to assess what had happened to understand the true extent of the human capabilities. Nexer leaned in, his eyes wide. And what did they find? Speaker shuddered, a haunted look passing over his face. Their findings were chilling, Nexer. The humans hadn't just outmatched the local Gorn forces. That ship, it was equipped with technologies far beyond anything the Gorn had ever seen. Impossibly powerful energy weapons that tore through our strongest shields like they were made of paper, nigh impenetrable shielding of their own that shrugged off our heaviest ordnance like it was nothing. And that's not all. Speaker continued grimly. They had some kind of FTL system that allowed them to essentially teleport straight through the Gorn blockade and planetary defenses. Our ships couldn't even track them. Technological superiority. Nexer shook his head in disbelief. Teleportation. That's impossible. Not for the humans, apparently. Speaker's voice was hollow. And their marines, Nexer. The Gorn couldn't even see them. Their armor seemed to bend light around it, rendering them practically invisible. Nexer sat back heavily, his mind reeling. Invisibility. Energy weapons. Teleportation. Speaker, this sounds like something out of a science fiction holonovel. Speaker laughed bitterly. I wish it were, my friend. But it gets worse. The most disturbing finding of all. Gorn intelligence determined that the human vessel was merely a medium-sized cruiser, not even one of their famed dreadnoughts. A chilling reality. Nexer felt his blood run cold. A cruiser? You mean? Speaker nodded somberly. If this is the capability of a single human cruiser, we can't even begin to imagine what their full war machine could bring to bear. The implications are... He trailed off, unable to finish. Nexer swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. What did the Emperor's advisors say? Surely they had some plan, some strategy. Speaker met Nexer's gaze, his eyes bleak. They unanimously agreed that if the humans had truly wished to seize the colony by force, absolutely nothing could have stopped them. The Gorn simply had zero capability to even slow them down, let alone win in an all-out conflict. Adjusting to reality. A new path forward. Nexer felt a chill run down his spine. So what will we do now? What can we do? Speaker sighed. The Emperor has ordered a top-down review of all our military practices and technology, a desperate attempt to close the staggering gap between us and the humans. Nexer frowned. Can it be done? Can we catch up? Speaker shook his head slowly. Privately, the Emperor confided in me that he knows it's futile. We're centuries behind the humans, Nexer. We could never catch up, not even if by some miracle the humans ceased all technological development today. Nexer's shoulders slumped. Then what's the path forward? He asked quietly. Seeking cooperation. Speaker's expression was grim. The only path is to accede to any human demands and pray to the egg that they remain committed to diplomacy. Nexer felt a cold knot of fear settle in his stomach. So we're entirely at their mercy, he whispered. Speaker nodded, his face etched with a profound weariness. He grimaced, a bitter smile twisting his lips. In the span of a single day, the humans reduced the proudest empire in the galaxy into a vassal state, jumping at shadows. And they did it without even firing a shot. He shook his head slowly. No one will ever dare cross them again. A changing landscape. Nexer shook his head slowly, a look of wonder on his scaled face. Speaker, I'm struggling to wrap my mind around it. The speed, the totality with which the humans have upended the galactic status quo. It's staggering. Nexer leaned forward, his gaze intent. Tell me, what have the humans done with the colony in the days since? How have they managed the transition? A wry smile tugged at the corners of Speaker's mouth. You'll scarcely believe it, Nexer. In a move that shocked everyone, the humans immediately released control back to the Gorn. Nexer's eyes widened. They did what? A surprising gesture. Speaker chuckled. Ambassador Hill personally contacted the Emperor and apologized for the regrettable necessity of the military action. He expressed his sincere hope that our two peoples could move forward in a spirit of friendship and cooperation. Nexer sat back, stunned. And then, the humans began pouring aid and resources into the colony. They repaired the damage caused by their strike in mere hours, using these incredible advanced construction drones. Speaker shook his head in amazement. I've never seen anything like it. Unbelievable, Nexer murmured. But that's not even the most shocking part, Speaker said, leaning forward. The humans shared a portion of their military technology with the Gorn forces. The future of galactic politics, a staggering leap forward. Nexer's jaw dropped. They shared their technology, after just defeating the Gorn. Speaker nodded. Not enough to rival human strength, of course, but still a staggering leap forward for the Gorn. Decades of advancement handed over freely. Nexer was silent for a long moment, trying to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. But why? What could possibly motivate such generosity mere days after a total military humiliation? A strategic move. The Emperor asked the same question. Speaker said, According to my sources, when the Emperor questioned Ambassador Hill about this, the humans simply said, "Your people now understand our resolve to defend ourselves. But we also want you to know our equally strong desire for friendship and mutual progress." Nexer let out a low whistle. "Remarkable." Speaker chuckled. I heard the Emperor nearly fainted on the spot, so overwhelmed was he by the human's gesture. Nexer shook his head in wonder. "I can scarcely imagine." Speaker's expression sobered. "I must confess, Nexer, while I applaud the human's olive branch, a part of me worries it may backfire." Potential resentment. Nexer cocked his head. "How so?" "The Gorn are a proud race," Speaker said. "Such an abrupt shift from subjugation to charity. I fear it may breed resentment, however irrational that may be. Wounded pride can be a dangerous thing." Nexer was quiet for a moment, considering. "I see your point, Speaker, but I suspect the humans have accounted for that. By so completely outmatching the Gorn, the humans have established a new paradigm," Nexer said slowly. "A situation whereby the Gorn can accept human aid without losing face." Speaker's brow furrowed. "I'm not sure I follow." "A new narrative. The gap between our civilizations is now so vast that there can be no shame in accepting help from the humans. It reframes the narrative. You see, the Gorn are not weak. The humans are simply so unimaginably strong that pride becomes irrelevant." Speaker's eyes widened. "I hadn't considered that. An astute observation, Nexer." Nexer smiled slightly. "It's an incredibly deft bit of diplomacy when you think about it. It demonstrates not just humanity's raw military prowess, but also their nuanced understanding of Gorn psychology and culture. The human mind." Speaker nodded slowly, a note of awe creeping into his voice. "The more I learn about the humans, the more I realize that their greatest weapon isn't their ships or their technology. It's their minds, their ability to understand and outmaneuver, not just militarily, but culturally and psychologically as well." Nexer leaned back in his chair, his expression pensive. "A fact we would do well to remember, my friend. A fact we would do well to remember."